You are not broken. You're not lazy. You're not lacking discipline. You're not unable to change or stick to anything. Your nervous system is simply dysregulated. And in this episode, you're going to learn signs of nervous system dysregulation so that you can identify them in your mind, in your emotions, in your body, in your sleep. You can recognize when you are slipping into a survival state so that you can bring yourself back to a regulated state where changing your relationship with food becomes so much more possible. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. If you have been repeating the same patterns with food for what feels like forever, and those patterns could live on either side of the pendulum. So one side is the binging, the overeating, the emotional eating, what feels very out of control, very chaotic. And then the other side of the pendulum is the restriction, right? The micromanaging, the weighing your food, tracking every single calorie, and using food as a means of control and safety and groundedness. It doesn't matter which side of the pendulum you're in, because I get both sides of listeners who listen to this podcast. I have been on both sides. And what I want you to hear is that the path to food freedom, the path to a healthy relationship with food, where you are an intuitive eater, you trust yourself, food is easy. The path there is not through trying harder or being better or having more discipline or willpower. It's not even through more learning, more understanding, more concepts. The path to the relationship with food that you want is safety and regulation. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Is I'm actually going to help you diagnose where you're at, where your nervous system is at on a daily basis, because this is our nervous system series. In episode 1, 2 weeks ago, I talked about the basics of the nervous system and why it is the key to healing your relationship with food. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go back and listen to that. And then last week, we talked about how our different nervous system states. So you've got the regulated state, safe and social. You've got fight or flight, freeze, and fawn, and how the different states will naturally impact your eating habits, how much you think about food, how anxious or guilty or shame you feel around food and your body. And in this episode, I want to help you look at your life on a daily basis and just do an audit of how does my nervous system feel? Because I know that up until I started learning about the nervous system and the subconscious mind, I was living in a dysregulated state most of the time. And like I said in previous episodes, 70% of the time, people are living in a survival state and they don't even know it. And it is so important to start bringing awareness, consciousness to the unconscious, to things that are outside of our awareness, because when we're in a survival state, so whether that's fight or flight, complete freeze, or in fawn, which is people pleasing, the primitive parts of our brain become highly activated for survival. And that means that the part of our brain that is responsible for higher level executive functions, higher level thinking, your attention, your cognitive reasoning, your impulse control, your ability to use your willpower to think through your decisions, to be intentional, all of that lives in your conscious mind, it shuts off. And so it is really hard to achieve your goals or to change your habits or to change really anything about yourself when you're in a survival state, because that's not the time for change. That's not the time for evolution or for growth. It is the time to just survive and get through the day. And so when you are in that survival state, things are on autopilot because your brain and your nervous system operates on the law of least effort. So if you have repeated a pattern enough times in your life, that is the easiest pattern to do. It happens outside of you having to make that decision. Think about when you drive to work. And you have done that drive so many times that you could do it with your eyes closed. And sometimes I'm sure that you've experienced this where you are literally driving to work and you zone out and you get to work and you're like, wow, I was really not present while my body was taking care of turning left and turning right and stopping, because you've just done that path so many times that you can do it on autopilot. So when you're in survival mode, you will revert back to patterns that you have done repeatedly. And when you are trying to change your relationship with food, but you are chronically dysregulated, of course, it feels so hard because your autopilot behaviors are taking over. And it's not because you're broken. It's not because there's something wrong with you. Any human being would do the same and does do the same, which is why so many people struggle to change. It's not because they don't know how to change. Well, there might be a small percentage of people who don't know how to change, but it's because they're living in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you don't have the capacity to do anything that requires more effort, because the reality is that changing your patterns that have kept you safe in a way or in something that feels familiar for so long, it requires energy. It requires capacity. So before we can even talk about increasing our capacity and how to regulate our nervous system, we have to be able to recognize what state we're in. I do this exercise with my clients at the very beginning of our module on the nervous system. I have them do a diagnostic, an audit of the state of their nervous system on a daily basis. And it is so mind-opening for so many of them, because here they were having blamed themselves for years or decades for not having enough willpower, for being lazy, for procrastinating. A lot of them had even made it part of who they were. I am a procrastinator. I can't change. I can't stick to anything. And when they do this audit, it's like this shame gets lifted of, I'm not broken. I'm just dysregulated. So I wanted to help you start bringing awareness to your state and how your nervous system is communicating with you on a daily basis, because we can't change anything until we have that awareness of what it feels like to be regulated, what it feels like to be dysregulated. And it's important for me to highlight that everyone's nervous system is going to be different. And so becoming an expert on your own body and the way your nervous system communicates with you, it is going to be so incredibly valuable, because then you're going to be able to recognize the warning signs and take action to bring yourself back to regulation when possible. Because there will be times in your life where things are out of your control and it's just natural that you will slip into dysregulation. if you are grieving, if you have a lot of family stressors, if there's things going on in your relationship with your kids, with your job, those things will happen. And it's not about avoiding dysregulation. There's no way around it. It's about how can I bring internal safety as much as possible when those things are happening? And also, how do I not get stuck in it? Because oftentimes what ends up happening is we relive the experiences that are stressful in our lives over and over again. And so I remember I had read this book a couple of years ago. I think it's called Buddha's Brain, but I could be completely wrong on that. And they were talking about how there are two darts that gets shot when there's a stressor in your life. The first dart is the actual experience. So let's say you get a really hard news about work, for example. That's the first dart. You cannot avoid the pain of that first experience. But the suffering comes from the second dart, which is when you relive the experience in your mind over and over and over again. When you look at animals in nature, if you've got like a little gazelle that's grazing and just enjoying her life, and then there is a lion that starts chasing this gazelle. Well, that gazelle will go into survival mode. It will go into fight or flight. It will start running. And once the threat has disappeared, so once the lion is gone, that gazelle will just go right back to grazing. And so she is able to move from survival back to regulation, survival back to regulation. And she's not thinking about the problem over and over and over again, which would keep her stuck in this survival state. And as humans, we are not meant to stay stuck in these survival states. It breaks down our body. It breaks down our immune system. It breaks down our emotions, our ability to cope with life. And so I'm going to start listing off some of the signs that could be showing up for you. And there's different categories. There's physical signs, there's emotional signs, there's cognitive signs. So what's going on in your mind? There's behavioral signs. So how do your behaviors and the choices you make, how do they change when you're dysregulated? I want you to see this as a discovery process. I am still learning every day, every week, every month, new signs of when I've fallen into dysregulation. For example, a lot of you are going to be able to relate to this. About 2 weeks ago, I was noticing that I was writing a lot more lists than usual. And I'm a big list girl in general. I love checking off my action steps. I love making lists. And that does not usually signal a sign of dysregulation. But when the lists get compulsive and I am checking the same list over and over again, I'm recreating the same list and it becomes this way to feel a sense of control, then I know, oh, my body does not feel safe right now. And I am turning to something as innocent as overdoing lists as a way to feel a sense of safety and control. So that is just an example of how I have started to see patterns that can be healthy when they become unhealthy. So let's dive into this audit, helping you recognize, am I living in survival states a lot of the time or most of the time? So the first thing to look at is your sleep. Your sleep is a big thing that gets interrupted because if you think about, when you're trying to survive, closing your eyes and getting a good night's sleep uninterrupted is counterproductive to your survival because when you're in survival, you feel like you need to be on high alert and hyper vigilant for threats at all times. So your sleep could be one of the first things that gets interrupted. When I started dating Luke, he told me that he had really bad sleeping patterns. He had a really hard time falling asleep and staying asleep. And what we came to realize after a couple months of dating is not that it was just his wiring, but it was that he was living in a dysregulated state most of the time. And so it had been affecting his sleep for so long. And now we've been doing so much work on nervous system regulation for the past couple of years and addressing, the things that were causing it. And he sleeps better than I do now. He falls asleep in like 2 seconds. It is so frustrating, but I'm happy for him. I'm glad he's getting a good night's sleep, but it really deeply affects your sleep patterns. So you might fall asleep relatively well, but you wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. and your brain just won't shut up. Or you struggle to fall asleep because it feels like your mind is going a million miles an hour and you're jumping from one topic to another topic to another topic. You're thinking about things that you're like, why am I even thinking about this right now? There is a proven study that has shown that when you're in survival mode, all of the different compartments of your brain, they just fire very incoherently. And so you might notice, and this could be on a daily basis, not just when you're trying to fall asleep, that your mind is just jumping from one thing to another, and it feels very, very incoherent. So you might also sleep, but wake up feeling like you never actually rested. You're exhausted, but wired. So you can't fall asleep, even though you're absolutely exhausted. It could also show up as you need over 8 or 9 hours of sleep, but you still feel tired. You sleep through the night, but you don't feel restored the next day. You fall asleep randomly during the day. Your body is just so exhausted that it forces a shutdown. Or if you wake up with your jaw clenched and your shoulders tight. So your sleep patterns can be a first telltale sign of survival mode, of living by the hormones of stress. Your emotions are also a great and very powerful indication of what state your nervous system is in. If you feel irritable or moody, anxious, frustrated, angry, hopeless, pessimistic, more days than not, that is a very clear sign. And we live in a society where we have normalized those emotions. We call those emotions normal states of being. Those are not normal states of being. Those are altered states of being. You can feel frustrated, you can feel angry, you can feel those emotions, but to get stuck in them and for that to be your baseline, that is an indication that your nervous system is on this threat detection mode. You might also experience this as mood swings. So you go from being fine to frustrated really quickly, up and down without much of a trigger. Everything that your husband or your partner or your kids are doing just triggers you and it frustrates you. You might feel a persistent heaviness or low level dread. Like there is this weight that follows you everywhere. You're anxious about things that you can't name. You just don't know what's going on. I felt that, last week? I was going on a couple of days where my anxiety was just getting more intense and I was so confused and I was so frustrated because I consider myself self-aware. I do a lot of inner work and I just could not place my finger on why I was feeling so anxious. And what do you know? I actually had fallen into a survival state. I was in fight or flight. I was very dysregulated, and it all came down. And finally, I was able to let it out and figure it out and really get the support I needed to work through it. But if you have this persistent feeling of anxiety that you just can't put your finger on what's causing it, if you feel overwhelmed by normal tasks like making decisions, answering emails, planning, cleaning up, I know that when I'm in a survival state, when I'm in fight or flight, my brain is so foggy that to make a decision like what I'm going to eat for dinner feels incredibly heavy. It feels so hard because, again, your capacity is lower when you're in a survival state. And so to do anything that requires more of you just feels overwhelming. If you're very hard on yourself, oh my goodness, I could do a full episode on this one. But if you notice that there is this constant inner critic that is bullying you and beating yourself up, and you are like, here's the thing, having high standards for yourself is great. I have very high standards for myself, but I also know that there is a difference between having loving and gentle high standards for myself, and when I feel like I've had a hard day, I can show myself compassion and ease and love. I can do that very well when I'm regulated, when my nervous system feels safe. But I can promise you that when I'm dysregulated and I'm in a survival state, I am so mean to myself. I am so hard on myself. I notice that my inner voice is so much harsher. And so that is a telltale sign for me of, ooh, okay, something needs your attention here because your nervous system does not feel good. It does not feel safe. And you're slipping into a survival state and nothing good happens there. So if you notice that you're very hard on yourself, and if it's hard to shift out of a bad mood once you're in one. So your emotions are such a good guidance system. If you're noticing, whoa, for the past couple of days, I have been so moody. I've been so irritable. I've been like just snapping at people and it's not warranted. I see that in myself. God, I love Luke so much. And I can see sometimes I'm just being so short with him and I'm irritable and he has done nothing wrong. And I know that it's my nervous system, it's my subconscious mind. Something is going on for me to look at because this isn't about him. And so those are some emotional signs. Your relationship with relaxation. This is a big one. If you sit down to rest, but you feel restless, you feel guilty, if you struggle to do nothing, you feel like you always need to be productive. And if you're not getting shit done, then you're doing something wrong, you're lazy, you're wasting time, everything feels urgent. That is a huge sign of dysregulation. And I was raised in an environment where my family, I was in a family of 5. My dad was the only one who worked. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Everyone was busy all of the time. And my dad is a hard worker. He has very high standards for himself and for everyone around him. And so my subconscious mind learned early on this belief that I always need to be working hard. I need to be productive. I need to be doing things. And if I'm not, then I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be criticized. I'm doing something wrong. I'm wasting time. And so my nervous system is just on this high alert all the time, feeling like I always need to, everything's urgent. I always need to be doing something. It needs to get done like yesterday. And when I'm dysregulated, that pattern shows up so much louder. But when I'm regulated, when I'm taking care of myself, of my nervous system, I'm able to relax. I'm able to relax into the present moment. Because think about it this way. When you're sitting down and you're trying to rest, Rest is about being in the present moment. It's about, okay, what am I doing right now? And how can I enjoy whatever I'm doing right now, whether it's reading a book or watching TV. But when you are unable to rest and you are just going back and forth between what needs to be done in the future, right? Your to-do list, what you need to be worried about in the future, or you are reliving something that happened in the past, you are not in the present moment. And to be safe enough to surrender into the present moment requires a nervous system that feels like it is safe to do so. But when you are in a survival state, you need to be thinking about the past in order to predict the future, right? You are always thinking about, what do I need to do to protect myself in the future? You're in this big state of protection. And so, of course, if you're dysregulated and you're constantly on high alert for threats, then when you go to sit down, you're not going to feel safe enough to relax into the present moment, because it's like, I need to be worrying about something. And this is actually another sign of dysregulation, is if you feel uncomfortable when there's nothing for you to worry about. I know that I'm definitely like this, where I'm always thinking, like right now we're redecorating our living room. And so I have all of these things to buy and to shop for. And then I've got some things that I'm working on in my business and some friendship stuff. And so there's always things on my mind. And I have this mentality of, I can't wait. I can't wait for this to all be done, because once I get through my to-do list, once all of this gets resolved, then I'm going to be able to relax. Maybe you have felt this way too. And then what happens is, once you do get all these things done, what subconsciously do? You put more things on your plate, more things for you to worry about, for you to think about, for you to do, because being relaxed and calm and not having something that is worrying you feels uncomfortable to your nervous system. And so that is another sign, is just like this constant feeling that you need to worry, that you need to be prepared for some threat that might be coming in your future. Another sign is if you keep yourself busy to avoid feeling. If you're always doing something, you're always seeing friends or doing things with family or saying yes to things that you want to say no to, you're always listening to a podcast or music or having TV in the background, there is constantly something going on, because to sit and be in your body and with your emotions and doing nothing else feels very unsafe for you. You avoid boredom at all costs. Maybe you can't remember the last time you felt bored. Downtime makes you feel anxious, more anxious, not less. You are compelled to always be moving, always keep going, always be doing. And you feel awkward or antsy during leisure time, right? You have a hard time just having fun, doing things that are just for pleasure. And then the last area that I'm going to talk about is your thought patterns. There are so many more that we can do in how you relate to others, your relationship with your body, your food patterns, which we definitely started diving deep into in our last episode. But your thought patterns are one that are pretty easy to catch, and they're loud and they're present. And so you will know that you are in a survival state if you're dysregulated by how your mind feels. So if you're overthinking decisions constantly, like you'll have a really hard time just making a decision and standing by it. If your mind jumps to worst case scenarios constantly, so whatever it is, you're just thinking about what could go wrong. How might this be the wrong decision? How might I regret this? You have racing thoughts, especially at night. So when you're during the day and you can keep yourself busy, that's great because it shuts it off. But by nighttime, the thoughts get really loud, the emotions get loud. And that's also, a little aside, the reason why emotional eating tends to happen at night in order to shut those down. If you can't focus or you can't concentrate, because to have your mind completely on one thing, one task, and to not be scanning your environment, what's going on in your life, in your relationships, what might be dangerous, again, it is not adaptive to your survival. And when you're in a survival state, that's what it's all about. And so to concentrate and to focus and to be fully present with something, whether it's a person or a task or a job or an activity, it would be counterproductive to your survival. But when you are regulated, when there isn't this constant state of threat, you're able to relax into the present moment and be with the thing, with the person, with the activity that you're doing. If you feel like you're stuck in loops, if you are thinking the same thoughts or ruminating over the same problem over and over and over again, this is a big one for me. If you struggle to be present, so we talked about this before, you're always either ahead, so you're planning ahead, you are worrying, you are anticipating what might happen, or you are thinking about the thing that you said and how that could have been wrong or mistakes that you've made. And if you're second guessing yourself constantly, if you can't trust yourself, if you feel like you're making the wrong decisions. So those are all ways that your thought patterns can act as a guidance system to help you recognize, oh my goodness, my mind has been racing lately and I cannot concentrate. I've been repeating the same loops, the same problems in my mind over and over and over again. Oh my goodness, I am dysregulated. My nervous system is in survival mode and I don't want to stay here, right? I've got to do something. I've got to go to my nervous system recipe, to my toolbox, and do what I can to relax my body, to bring safety back into my body, to bring myself back into the present moment. And it is not this like quick fix where you do one thing, you journal once, you go for one walk, you take a bath, and then boom, you're out of survival mode. When you have been living by the hormones of stress and in dysregulation for years or your entire life, then it is a process of gradually showing your nervous system that it is safe, that you are safe, to bring yourself into the present moment, to stop being on high alert, to unlearn patterns that you've repeated over and over again. And my hope is that, well, first, as I was listing some of these signs, you were paying attention to how some of these might be showing up in your life. And if you are recognizing, oh my goodness, there are so many here that are me. Like, this is me. She just described me. Like, that's how I feel on a daily basis. And this is how I have felt for years or decades. My hope, and I want you to hear this, is that you realize that this is not just who you are. This is not just your personality trait that you are meant to overthink and second guess and not trust yourself and have anxiety and have mood swings and be irritable and be reactive and impulsive. This is not just who you are. It's just that your nervous system has been dysregulated for a really long time. And no one has taught you better. I know that it can be really hard when you start realizing, I can't believe that I've been living in survival mode for so long. But how could you have known? We're not taught this in school. I want to make it my life project to get this taught in school because it could prevent so many challenges and issues that we as humans face and maladaptive coping mechanisms that we end up turning to because we have no other way to feel grounded or safe or relief in a body that feels dysregulated. And so you see kids who are chronically on their phones and people turning to food and alcohol and drugs and overspending and consumerism. There is so much that can be traced back to the health of our nervous systems. And so that's why I wanted to do this series, and I want to talk about this more and more, because the only way for you to start creating real changes in your life so that you can feel more peace, your thoughts can slow down, they can feel more joyful, they can feel more kind towards yourself, you can relax, you can feel happier emotions on a day-to-day basis. I'm telling you that I did not think it was possible to feel joy and peace and calm for an entire day. And as I started doing this work, I realized that this work is about expanding your capacity to feel good. There's this saying that says that healing from trauma is not about learning to deal with the bad. It's about learning to feel safe with the good. And that's what this is about. It's increasing your capacity to feel good and to feel safe and to feel okay in your body and in your world for longer and longer periods of time. And the first step is to recognize when and how often you are living in survival states, you are living by the hormones of stress, and how it impacts you, how it impacts your emotions, your sleep, your thought patterns, your behaviors. Because it doesn't matter if I teach you a bunch of regulation tools and strategies if you don't know when to use them and why they're important. So I'm going to give you a little piece of homework for this episode, which is to do some journaling and some reflection on what are some signs that show up in my life that indicate that I'm living by the hormones of stress, that I am dysregulated, so that number one, you can have more compassion for yourself and realize that this is not just who you are. And number two, you can take actions, the right actions, not trying harder or doubling down on willpower, which will just dysregulate you more. So being able to place your attention, your energy, and your focus on the things that will actually make a difference. So that is your homework for today. I will see you next week as we continue this nervous system series. I love hearing from you and just knowing what about these episodes is resonating with you, is helping you. So you can send me a DM on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health. I want to hear what is hitting, what's making a difference in your life. I love you, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.